All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Monday again, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having a great start to your week. We have our first series preview of the conference finals. Today we're hitting the Indiana Pacers and the Boston Celtics. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to our brand new YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. And keep dropping mailbag questions in those YouTube comments so we can keep hitting them throughout the rest of the postseason. All right, let's talk some basketball. So we're going to do just like we usually do on the series previews. We're going to go through the season series, talk about some stats that we saw from the regular season between these teams, go over the gambling odds, Pacers on offense, Celtics on offense, and then I will give my pick. So Boston won the season series 3-2. Boston beat them by 41 at home in early November. The Pacers beat them in the in-season tournament quarterfinals. Remember, that was in the in-season tournament games where you actually hosted the game at home. So Indiana was at home in that game. They ended up winning, I think, 122-112. Boston then went and beat them in Indiana by 17 in early January. But then 2 days later, still in Indiana won by 2 points. So Indiana did get 2 wins both in Indiana in this series. And then the Celtics beat them by 5 in Boston on January 30th. So I'll only look at the matchup where Pascal Siakam played. But if I'm not mistaken, I think Al Horford did not play in that game. And I think that was one of the games that Tyrese Haliburton still missed a good chunk of the game with his hamstring injury. So not too much that we can take away from the regular season series, except for that Indiana has been more confident in this matchup at home. Stats from the season series: Boston had a 126 offensive rating. Indiana had a 114 offensive rating, so that's a plus 12 net in favor of Boston. Boston dominated the rebounding battle. 56.1% of available rebounds went to Boston. Indiana won points off of turnovers, 16.6 to 13.8 per game. Second chance points, 15.4 to 14.8 per game. Fast break points scored, 13.4 to 12.8 per game. And points in the paint, 55.2 to 51.6. So Indiana does have advantages in the margins in this series, but I think Boston is very clearly the better half-court team, which we'll get into in detail here in just a minute. Per DraftKings, the Celtics are favored once again to win by a massive margin. They are minus 900 on DraftKings to advance to the NBA Finals. All right, let's start with the Pacers on offense. I'm going to go through the matchups really quick, and then we'll get into some details. So Jaylen Brown, Jrue Holiday, and Derek White all spent time on Tyrese Haliburton as a primary matchup during the regular season, but I think they'll probably start with Derek White. Derek White was the direction they went in their most recent matchup, so I think that's the direction they're going to go. With Andrew Nembhard, I think we'll see Jrue Holiday in that matchup. With Aaron Nesmith, I think we'll see Jaylen Brown, at least to start. We're going to go over some options here in a minute. With the Siakam-Turner matchups, that's where it gets interesting, because Miles Turner is shooting 46% from three in these playoffs. Pascal Siakam is only shooting 32%. So Boston may end up starting with Horford on Turner, but they'll be extremely vulnerable to the pick and pop there, right? Like, that's one of the pet actions that Indiana's going to run. Haliburton's going to bring the ball up the floor. Turner's going to set the screen as Haliburton turns the corner, goes downhill, and attacks at Horford or at Porzingis or whoever it is. And Derek White or whoever it is on the ball is chasing after Haliburton. Turner's just going to pop out to that three-point line, and he's going to be wide open. That's going to be a big coverage gap that Indiana can take advantage of in this series. This is where Jayson Tatum and his defensive versatility comes to the table. And we've talked a lot about this in this playoff run. For all of the conversation surrounding Tatum's scoring inconsistency, which I think is fair, when it comes to his total package as a basketball player, because he's such a big, strong forward, and because he has such a high basketball IQ through his experience in all these big games, he's a very useful, Swiss Army knife in a lot of these types of situations. We saw, for instance, in the Cleveland series, Jayson Tatum take Evan Mobley for long stretches because he could switch ball screens, right? That's going to be a big direction that I think we'll see Boston go in this series. I think sooner than later, we'll see Jayson Tatum move over to the Miles Turner matchup. The advantage there is Turner's not going to be able to bully Tatum in the post, and then if you run a ball screen with Haliburton and Turner, you can literally just switch it. And now Tatum is on Haliburton and Derek White. Now Tatum's on Haliburton. You have Derek White or whoever it is that's on the ball that's on Miles Turner. And again, if Indiana tries to attack through the post with Miles Turner, you're just kind of okay with that there, right? So I think we'll see that direction eventually. Because Pascal Siakam is shooting only 32% from three, and also Al Horford is a very gifted positional defender. One of Horford's best traits as a defender is he can read you and find out which direction you're going, beat you to the spot, and then offer a contest and make you shoot over the top. Like, he's not a super aggressive ball pressure, like force turnovers guy, but he's a guy that can at least play you into your weaknesses as a basketball player. And so with Siakam, that's what that's going to be, preventing him from getting downhill and all the way to the rim, but rather just beating him to spots and forcing him to make shots over the top. So in ISO situations, I like Horford to at least be able to do a decent job on Siakam, and then closing out to the three-point line. I expect him to be able to close out short and kind of just contain as he's driving. Now, what if Siakam gets going? Because we've seen this, right? Like, Siakam has had issues where, like, let's say, for instance, that the Pacers go to Turner ball screens and Tatum switches and they kind of shut that down. So they go, okay, let's bring Horford up into the ball screen. Let's attack with Siakam as a screener, right? Siakam's probably going to pop. And in those situations, you're having Horford offer a late closeout. Now, let's say that Siakam gets going, right? Siakam hits a few threes. Maybe it turns out that Siakam's too fast for Horford at this phase of his career, and he just starts toasting Horford off the dribble. Or maybe even when Porzingis is in the game, later points in the series, if you have similar problems there. There's another option that Boston can go to that I think makes some sense. You could actually end up sliding Jaylen Brown onto Siakam, and once again, switch those screens in the event that they run Siakam in the ball screen, because of the fact that Aaron Nesmith has not been shooting the ball particularly well from three. He's shooting 30% from three in the playoffs. He hit 2 for 2 in Game 7 against the Knicks, but he was pretty cold in the few games before that. So you could basically just put Horford on Nesmith and roam and try conceding those threes, which will allow you to contain the ball screen actions with Haliburton and Siakam, or Haliburton and Turner. And that's just the advantage of having two forwards like Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum that have the versatility to guard guards and to guard bigger players. Now, the biggest issue Boston will have, in my opinion, is going to have to do mainly with Haliburton when he's coming off of those screens with speed when Horford is in the action. So let's say Horford's on Nesmith and Horford comes up to the level of the screen on Haliburton. One of the weaknesses that Boston has, as we saw with Donovan Mitchell in the last round, and as we saw a little bit with Tyler Herro in the first round, although it's a much lesser player, they can be somewhat vulnerable to pull-up shooters, right? Guys that can come off the screen with pace and kind of cause issues for that screen defender coming up to the level. That's something that Boston has shown some vulnerability to. So that's like the one thing in the half court where I could see Indiana having a good amount of consistent success is, like, I do think that Tyrese Haliburton is capable of doing some damage to Horford in ball screens, or Porzingis in ball screens. But outside of that, though, I think they've got the personnel to make things a lot more difficult elsewhere on the floor. Indiana's main advantage as an offensive team in this series is going to be in transition. So they've scored 329 points in transition in this playoff run. That's 25.3 per game. That's the most out of any of the playoff teams that have appeared in this playoff run. They are the only one of the 4 remaining teams in the conference finals to average over 20 transition points per game. So as much as Boston's half-court personnel has the ability to match up with Indiana in all of these ways, that's not where Indiana's going to look to attack. They're going to look to run like absolute crazy. This is where Haliburton and TJ McConnell, they are just these straight line drive, dribble penetration, wreak havoc type of guys, right? And getting out in transition, getting cross matches, getting, they'll try to push and see if they can't get early offense opportunities for Siakam to attack against like a Derek White or one of their smaller guards, right? Like, they're going to constantly be looking to push as much as possible. But there's another side of this coin. Boston has been the best transition defense in our transition defense, I should say, in the playoffs so far. They've allowed just 14.6 points in transition per game. That is the fewest out of any of the 16 teams that have appeared in a playoff series this year. So it's kind of like a clash of two elite units there. Indiana's transition offense versus Boston's transition defense. Here are the keys for both teams, in my opinion. for Boston have to contain the ball. They have excellent guard defenders with Jrue Holiday and with Derek White, right? If they contain dribble penetration for TJ McConnell and Tyrese Haliburton, that will shut Indiana's offense off. They're an advantage creation offense. All their guys off the ball are play finishers. Aaron Nesmith is a play finisher. Andrew Nembhard can run second side action, but not to a super effective level against super elite defenses. So I look at him as a guy that if you can avoid advantage situations, you can contain a little bit. Siakam is a guy that can operate on an island a little bit, but he's an elite play finisher. Miles Turner is a play finisher. Obi Toppin is a play finisher. These are guys that, even Ben Shepherd, play finisher. These are guys that are primarily looking to attack with an advantage. So if you can contain dribble penetration, not just in the half court, but also in transition by getting back and just kind of containing their ball handlers, you will go do a lot of damage to Indiana's offense. Second part of it, protect Horford and Porzingis as much as possible by giving them easier matchups. Miles Turner pick and pop, that could be an issue, right? Siakam potentially could be an issue, although I think Horford has a chance to do a decent job on him. But finding ways to stash him on a guy like Nesmith, who you don't need to necessarily worry about to a great extent on the three-point line, that could go a long way to protecting those guys in ball screens. Nesmith is also not a great movement shooter. So if he pops to the three-point line in ball screens, as long as they're up at the level and they contain the ball, you can almost deal with some of the issues that you have in terms of foot speed containing Haliburton by just being super aggressive, coming way out to the level, just making him get rid of the basketball because he's going to be getting rid of it to Nesmith, who hasn't shot the ball particularly well. Now, Nesmith will slash off the catch on the wing, and that's a way he can do a lot of damage. Did a lot of that in Game 7 against the Knicks, right? But that's something that you can deal with in defensive rotation. So again, containing the ball in transition in the half court is going to be the major piece there, and protecting Horford and Porzingis by giving them easier matchups. For Indiana, attack Horford wherever he is. As we saw, like I talked about earlier with Donovan Mitchell and Tyler Herro, you can have success against Boston's defense by attacking them in ball screens with pull-up shooters, right? Tyrese Haliburton's been shooting the ball a lot better as of late. He brings a lot of speed to the equation there. That is their best entry point in the half court, attacking the big guys in ball screens. Push and transition to the maximum possible extent. This is going to have another layer to it on the defensive end, which we'll get to in a minute. But I think they're going to lose the half-court battle. Boston has better half-court personnel. So you have to sow chaos as much as possible. Push the ball up the floor. Look for quick cross matches for Siakam. Look for runouts, quick early threes, early offense. Just upping the pace as much as possible to turn the series into a track meet. That, to me, is their only hope. We're this close to crowning a new NBA champ, and with the action heating up on the court, it's even hotter at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. There's only so many games left, and DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered with same-game parlays, live betting, odds boosts, and so much more. Don't miss out, or you'll have to wait until next NBA season to place your bets. It's super easy for first-timers to get started. Try betting on something simple, like picking a team to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your squad, and place your first bet. It's that simple. The championship odds right now, as we head into the conference finals, according to DraftKings, Boston's at -150, the Timberwolves at +275, the Mavericks at +500, and the Indiana Pacers, a long shot, at +2,500. New to DraftKings, listen up. New customers can get a no-sweat bet up to $1,500. Just deposit at least $5, and you'll get a bonus bet back equal to your first bet if it doesn't hit. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. That's code HOOPS for new customers to get a no-sweat bet up to $1,500 if your first bet doesn't hit. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Let's look at Boston on offense. With Derek White, I think we'll see Andrew Nembhard there. With Jrue Holiday, I think we'll see Tyrese Haliburton there. Main reason why is Jrue Holiday's not as good of a movement shooter as Derek White is, right? So if Haliburton's going to hedge and recover, you want to hedge and recover and leave an opening with Jrue Holiday. Like we talked about with the Knicks series, remember there was a lot of hedging and blitzing from Haliburton, but it was Deuce McBride who was primarily operating out of that, right? So you want to make the worst movement shooter of the group try to move work off of those Haliburton hedges. I think we'll see Siakam on Jaylen Brown, and I think we'll see Aaron Nesmith on Jayson Tatum, at least to start. We'll see if they tweak the matchups over the course of the series. The Tatum White, so here's the thing. I want to start with, let's start with Aaron Nesmith on Jayson Tatum. So Aaron Nesmith is quicker than Jayson Tatum, and he's got a really strong build, so he can avoid some of the bully ball stuff. So on an island, whenever they go one-on-one, he should be able to force Tatum to settle into pull-up jumpers. And the main issue there is just fouling. Because like for instance, the in-season tournament championship game, there were a bunch of possessions down the stretch of that game where Nesmith forced Tatum to settle for tough contested mid-range jumpers, but he like fouled him on one on the left baseline where he kind of pressed too far up underneath him. So that's the main piece, is just be careful not to foul him. But in the on an island situations, I really, really like that matchup. Specifically with the Tatum-White two-man game, they ran that a bunch down the stretch of the in-season tournament quarterfinal. But in the in-season tournament quarterfinal, they ran a lot of Derek White, Jayson Tatum two-man game. And in those setups, Nesmith was able to fight over the top of the screens and avoid switches in many of those cases. And that actually like helped stagnate Boston's offense down the stretch of that game. Anything with Jrue Holiday, like I mentioned earlier, you hedge and recover with Haliburton. If Boston looks to just attack Haliburton, so like if they just throw the ball to Jrue Holiday and try to post up or ISO Haliburton, I take that as a win for Indiana, because that's like a rhythm disruptor for the rest of the offense. Even if he scores a few buckets in the post each half, like that, it just kind of disrupts the flow of Boston's offense, which at its best is driving and kicking for wide open threes, right? Keys for both teams. With Boston, ball movement. Don't get carried away with matchup hunting. Generate a quick advantage and play off of that. The main advantage actions that I look at for them are Horford pick and pop, right? Because Miles Turner is going to run a drop coverage. So just like we talked about earlier with Miles Turner, if, like, let's say Aaron Nesmith is on Tatum, if Nesmith is going to chase Tatum over the top and Turner is going to corral him in a drop coverage, then Horford can pop to the three-point line. He's going to be open every single time. From there, if he's got the three-point shot going, he can keep shooting it. If not, he can play drive and kick. Just rip to the middle, bring that next defender, swing to probably a really good shooter standing in the corner, right? So that's a good entry point for them. Secondly, Jrue slipping out of the hedge and blitz, just like what the Knicks did with Deuce McBride, right? Haliburton hedges, just quickly get rid of the ball to Jrue on the roll. I think that's where you go with Tatum, because Tatum can see over the top really well. He'll handle those blitzes really well. I think Tatum's their best passer, so just have Tatum handle that action. When Haliburton hedges, just dump it off to Jrue. Same thing we just talked about with Al Horford. If he's got the shot going, take the shot. If not, just drive that advantage from the top of the key. Bring in an extra defender. Make those kickouts from there. But again, ball movement's going to be key. Do not play down to the competition. Hunt elite shot quality throughout the series. And again, you got to look at it like there's a decent chance, according to Vegas, I think Minnesota's a minus 190 favorite to beat Dallas. I will be picking Minnesota in all likelihood. I haven't done my series preview yet, but that's what I'm most likely going to pick. You're going to be playing just an unbelievably good defense potentially in the championship round. And I think Dallas is a better defense than Indiana anyway. So like it's going to be a tough battle in the NBA Finals. And like this is another series where you have an opportunity to kind of polish up some of your decision making before you get to that point. Lastly, get favorable matchups for Tatum. I like Tatum attacking literally anybody except for Aaron Nesmith on this Pacers roster. I think he's got a quickness and strength advantage against Pascal Siakam. I think he's got a speed advantage against any of the bigger players that Indiana will play. I think he can do damage to the smaller guards, guys like Nesmith or Nembhard and Haliburton. But Nesmith specifically, I think, is like the fire hydrant type that can keep him in front and force him into contested jumpers. So set solid screens to force switches, pushing the ball in transition to get cross matches, and then whenever you get those mismatches for Tatum, just clear the side and let him go to work. That's where I think Tatum is at his best. Cleared side, usually from the right block, is where I prefer Tatum going to work. And then lastly, I put this in all bold, just shot selection. Just decision-making and shot selection. Like I mentioned earlier, you're prepping for a much tougher challenge in the future. This is a series where you've got to tighten those things up before you get into the next round. On the Indiana front, how do you play Boston into poor shooting nights? That's your best chance to win, right? The easiest way to play a team into a poor shooting night is by fatiguing them. How do you fatigue them? Through physicality, which is like ball pressure, right? Just doing everything with force to make sure they're tired. And then 2, push the pace. This is the defensive element of making the game into a track meet. Tired legs are more likely to miss shots. Make Boston play faster than they're typically used to playing. You have a better opportunity of playing them into poor shooting nights. But the reality is, Boston is going to get good looks from three in this series. And if they make them, you're probably going to lose. That's the problem with having 5 shooters on the floor the way that Boston does, and having a guy like Haliburton that you can easily attack and get the defense in rotation. So even just having a pick and pop big. Like, the Celtics are going to have 2 easy actions they can run at any given time, which is the Horford pick and pop or the Jrue Holiday pick and slip. Any one of those, you're going to get the defense in rotation. From there, you're playing drive and kick with 5 shooters. So Boston's going to get great looks in the half court. Really, I think Indiana's only chance is to just play crazy fast and try to fatigue Boston into having poor shooting nights and just kind of leaning into their specific advantages. I'm picking Boston. I think they have better personnel on both ends of the floor, and I think they have the best player in the series. But I do think Indiana is going to push this series to 6 games. Boston has a tendency to ease up after getting a lead, which we've seen multiple times in this playoff run already. And Indiana's really good at home. Indiana's 6-0, undefeated at home in this postseason. They have a 126 offensive rating at home. They've beat Boston at home twice this year. So I think that Indiana's going to find ways to extend the series through just the energy of their home crowd and through their speed and just them playing super, super hard. But I just have a hard time believing Indiana can win a series like this 4 times out of 7 when Boston has the personnel advantages that they have on both ends of the floor. We will be live on YouTube after the final buzzer of Game 1 tomorrow night to break it all down. I will see you guys there.